meta in Legacy is all over the place. There's so many cool decks, and it really rewards players that have put in the work. And we're going to dive in and take a look. I'm over here showing off our Mox field, and we're going to highlight a couple of decks to kind of keep an eye out for in Legacy in the meta, especially as we're going to start bringing up a little bit more Legacy coverage here on the channel as our LGS starts getting into more Legacy content. Let's talk a little bit about some of those aggro strategies that you could be able to pilot, because there's two big ones that you should be keeping an eye out for in Legacy. Right, who's ready for some aggro here? We've got our Legacy Eldrazi list. This is the one that won the Invitational on Saturday. So this is a very cool list. The idea of it is you're going to just kind of keep the pressure on constantly. It plays very well when they're kind of getting that engine revving up and rolling. If they fall behind, it stumbles a lot more. So you need to kind of keep the pressure going and go, go, go. If you like that idea, this might be the deck for you. So let's talk a little bit about what the deck can do here. You've got Flesh Rakers in here. This not only generates you mana, but keeps pressure on your opponent by being able to start shredding them every time that you're going to be casting one of your spells, because everything in here, with the exception of one card, is colorless. That other card we'll get to in a minute here. But so you're going to be able to drop this down pretty early, especially with our lands that we've got: Eldrazi Temples, Ancient Tombs, Eye of Ugins, right? We've got a lot of ways to kind of generate a bunch of mana early on. One thing to note is that it is running our Petrified Hamlet. So this is one flavor that we saw basically for the weekend of whether or not you're a Wasteland list or you're trying to stop the Wasteland from doing its thing. In this case, you name Wasteland, stops them from being able to activate it. So one little note when it comes to the lands. But your idea, generate a bunch of creatures, go turn them sideways. The big payouts here we'll get to in a second. You know, we've got some ways to disrupt a little bit with Thought Knot Seers. Our Wastegate Battle Mage from being able to kind of bounce things, exile things. It's really a nice utility thing. Because we have Cabin of Souls, we can generate mana off it. No big deal in that regard. Of course, we can kind of go wide a little bit with it that heralds the end, especially with all of that tokens that we've generated off our Glaring Flesh Raker. We can then turn them into a bunch of 1/2s or 2/3s, depending on how many of these, of course, lords we've got on the battlefield here. Now, our big aggro strategies that we've got, of course, everybody knows about Reality Smasher. Being able to have a 5/5 trample and haste is really good, but our Eldrazi Line Breaker is really the kind of big pusher here. Only costs 3 mana, one that we do need red for to be able to cast, so there is a little bit of difference in that. But it is a 3/3 with trample. At the beginning of your combat of your turn, target creature you control gets haste and gets +X/+O until the end of turn, where X is the number of Eldrazi. We talked about the synergies with Glaring Flesh Raker. This is one of those ones, right? I've gone wide, I've shredded you a bit, and now I play an Eldrazi Line Breaker, and I'm going to be giving something like +4, +5 very quickly here, and put that pressure on your opponent. Very, very tough to be able to deal with all that aggro because it has trample, and you're just sort of doing that sort of go wide idea. But you can also go pierce, right? You could say, I'm going to give this, because it has trample, going to give this haste and buff this up, and now you're going to have to deal with this pierce strategy. On the other side of things, we'll get to our broadside bombardiers. This is that big one we were talking about. 2/2 menace haste. This boast ability is really the scary part. Sack another creature or artifact, and this deals damage equal to 2 plus the sack permanent's mana value. So in this case of, we've gotten our Thought Knot Seer, we've gotten a Reality Smasher, maybe we've gotten up to a Devourer state, we can finish somebody off. Or our Eldrazi Line Breaker has just pierced through for a bunch of damage, and then I'll sacrifice it and deal that extra 5 damage on top, right? 2 plus its mana value, so, you know, math is hard, but it's okay. So that's kind of the idea. It's all about the creatures. You're utilizing things like Kozilek's Command in tandem with Glaring Flesh Raker to be able to shred people down, generate a bunch of spawns, go, go, go. You can exile scary things. You can set yourself up by drawing cards. It's good. Also, you can disrupt the graveyard with it, which we've seen a couple of graveyard lists so far. Chalice, great. Love to see it. Throw those chalices in there. So very powerful list, very aggressive to be able to go for here when you're looking at the Eldrazi side. So let's dive over to the other big aggro strategy in Legacy right now. Continue our aggro plan, and this time we're talking about a modern deck that got ported into Legacy. It's basically Modern Horizons deck, Boros Energy. So you can see some of the cool tools that we get access to in Legacy that not available in Modern, specifically the Amped Raptor, which was banned. So, why would we not want to play with it there? There are a couple other cool tools, but if you're not familiar with the Boros energy package, let's talk about it a little bit. You have some very high synergy cards, Guide of Souls, Oscillate Pride, Ajani, the way that they kind of high synergize together. You're going to be gaining life, getting energy every time a creature enters off Guide of Souls, which goes very well with Oscillate Pride, being able to generate more and more cats. It's got lifelink. Every time that you're gaining life, you're making more cats until you get the City's Blessing. Then you kind of double up on the amount of tokens that you created. And then a Johnny, of course, will be able to flip if a cat died this turn. So very, very important, especially when we've got like Goblin Bombardment and things like that. But, Voice of Victory sees play in the Modern version, so we're used to that one there. The other cool tools that we're going to talk about here is this Stadium Headliner, right? Sack this creature. It deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature. A little bit of kind of help with us blowing things up, but also another mobilized creature. Just sort of out the gate aggressive ways to kind of go about things. The other side of here is our Agate Instigator, this offspring. Whenever another creature you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent because of the snowballiness that we talked about with Guide of Souls and Oscillate Pride, even Amped Raptor. We just sort of can kind of spin our wheels and just sort of run you over there. Decent amount of removal here. Erode, we talked about how important and powerful this is. Static Prism, Goblin Bombardment, and a new one, Lorehold's Charm, which, it's able to kind of give us a little bit more flexibility here because of the burst damage we can do with it, of being able to do things like +1/+1 trample, right? Each opponent sacks a non-token artifact of their choice. There's a lot of artifacts that are running around. We talked about the Tron list and stuff like that. So, what other tools do we got? Well, we do, because it's white, we get access to Caracas, we get access to Wasteland, and pretty much it's just go fast. One thing that we did get to see is this Price of Progress is a very powerful card if you're running red. You're able to kind of dome a lot of people equal to non-basic lands. So this could be against some of those Jeskai lists. This can definitely be useful against those Tron lists to kind of help close out the game there. So very powerful aggro list to be able to take a look through here. But let's kind of dive in and take a look at some of our other lists in Legacy. Mono Black Aggro. Now, this is the other big aggro strategy in Legacy. Of course, we're not going to highlight every single deck. There are so many decks in Legacy. We're trying to get at least enough flavor, especially with decks that were featured at the Four Seasons event over the weekend here. But here is one of them. There's a couple ways that you can go about it, a couple ways you can build it, but this is more or less the shell that you should know about, right? Moonshadow plus the Super Shredder. The idea of it is Moonshadow cares about permanents leaving the battlefield, and then it's going to increase its power because it's a 7/7 with 6 -1 counters. The more things leave the battlefield, the more that it grows. It has menace, so that evasiveness, very good for pushing damage. The other scary menace creature is the Super Shredder. This is caring about a permanent leaving the battlefield, dealing that 1 damage. Oh, sorry. I mixed it up. This one only cares about the battlefield. The Moonshadow cares about anything going to the graveyard. Surveil lands, things like that, discarding any of those permanents does trigger for the Moonshadow, where Super Shredder only cares about the battlefield. There we go. Got that out of the way. We caught up. I was ready for all the people to start spamming in chat, but that's okay. So your idea is you get these evasive creatures down early, turn 1, ideally turn 2 at the latest, and then you just go. You can cheat them into play early because of things like Dark Ritual, right? Turn 1, I can play any creature in my hand. I can play multiple creatures in my hand if I'm very lucky and play a Dothy and have a Thoughtseize. I can sit here and Moonshadow and Super Shredder and then drop my 0 drops and just sort of go, go, go. It's got removal with Fatal Push, Snuff Out, help clear the way to push for damage. You're able to utilize Thoughtseize and Hymn to Torok with Dothy Voidwalker to maybe get some better resources later, but also keep your opponent in check and disrupt them. Some lists are not running as many of the Dothys, as many of the Hymns, that side of things. They might be on that Burrowgoyf. This list runs it in the sideboard compared to main board. That's the only sort of you can decide how you want to go. That's your flavor, right? Some of the permanents that we talked about to be able to trigger Super Shredder and Moonshadow are our baubles, both Urza and Mishra's Bauble, helping us out get a little bit of advantage on what our opponent opponent has going on and generate some card draw off them. So because our idea is basically we're going hellbent and we're just throwing creatures out there and turning them sideways. Very aggressive, very in your face. So it's relatively cheap, I say, as a legacy list goes, because you don't really need any dual lands to run it. Right? You see 5 basic swamps, a mortuary helps us be able to trigger off the surveil, right? The wasteland's in here to disrupt your opponent. So very in your face, very aggressive. I will make a quick note with the sideboard here about May, all right? Scornful Striker. She's so good. She, like, whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, they lose 2 life, just sort of again, the shredding. That's kind of the name of the game. Death of the 1,000 cuts there. So very cool. I'm a big fan of Sheldrick's Edict. Maybe put one main board, but it's hard to fit it in this list. But that's why I run 61 cards in my list. Who knows? All right, let's jump over. We've seen a little bit of the aggro style. Let's go and take a look. There are 3 tempo-based decks that we're going to highlight coming up next. All right, it's time to talk about our Blue X tempo-based deck, starting with the one that I love the most, or at least the one that I'm going to be playing a lot more going forward here, and that's our blue-white Phelia list, or blue-white blink, if you will, in Legacy. If you're familiar with the blink list in Modern, it's going to be very similar to that, but we get some better tools. We get access to things like Daze, all right? Be able to counter our opponent's stuff. We get access to things like Force of Will. And the big one that I'm most excited about is 4 copies of Stifle. If you have never stifled somebody's fetch land, you are in for a treat. To be on the, of course, one that is doing the stifling. Being on the receiving end of it, maybe not so great. But also we get to do stifle of so many different things. We can stifle our Quantum Riddler triggers here. We can stifle the Phelia stuff. If I'm blinking your thing out of existence, I can stifle it, right? It's very similar to the consigned to memory idea that you might see in Modern here. So being able to do those sort of things is really powerful. The idea is we're running 4 Tamiyo. Tamiyo is amazing. Being able to sit here and go, turn 1 Tamiyo, turn 2 immediately flip with a Brainstorm. Yes, please. It feels so good. Also running Ponders to help us out. So it's a lot of this sort of tempo. I'm going to be drawing a lot of cards. I'm going to be getting some advantage. I'm beating you down with the Quantum Riddler here. I'm keeping your stuff in exile with Phelia, so it works out really well. Of course, Teferi to help make sure you can't cast stuff on my turn. We've also got ways to kind of disrupt you in that regard. Spell Pierces, things like that. Swords to Plowshare to get rid of some creatures. We've got Wastelands in here, Caracas in here, Containment Priest is really cool in the sideboard here because it works great with Phelia. If I'm sitting here and exiling it, guess what? If a non-token creature would enter the battlefield and if it wasn't cast, exile it instead. So I'll exile your stuff with Phelia, and Containment Priest will keep it in exile. Very cool toolboxy sideboard in the sense of what do I need more of? Control, removal, disruption, things like that. So I'm very happy to see this list pop up a little bit more in Legacy. I'm going to be testing it out at my LGS here. But yeah, this sort of like tempo advantage. I'm going to draw a lot of cards. I'll put a little bit of pressure here, and that's sort of the thing. It does have a little bit of weaknesses here and there, but we're not going to spend as much time because we're really just focusing on what is the deck trying to do and what can you expect from this kind of game plan. And if you're familiar with the Blink stuff, you already know, right? We're going to be able to sit here and do some of this Quantum Riddler shenanigans. We'll do some of this Phelia action, and you just churn through so many cards with it. You can get away with being like, I'm 2 for 1ing myself with this Force of Will, right? I'm constantly sitting here and losing out on resources, but I know that my Riddler is going to sit here and get them all back. So it's very, very cool when it comes to this sort of tempo-based stuff. But let's go over and take a look at one of the most popular, the Dimir Tempo. All right, blue-black tempo, Dimir Tempo, whatever flavor you want to call it, depending on how you want to build it, right? The idea of it is we're going to be getting card advantage like we normally would off of a bunch of cards, and specifically Flow State being the #1 card, seeing a lot of play. You'll see it in a lot of these tempo lists, a lot of the control style lists care about it. Even some of the combo lists care about it, right? It's that good of a card. So Flow State, really powerful, especially if you have so many things in your graveyard. Of course, we've got Ponder in here. We've got some Brainstorm. We've got our counterspell action, Force of Negation, Force of Will. Spell Snare, also really good against this flow state scenario that we're in with Legacy. But it's tempo-y because we've got some creatures, we've got our Tamios, we've got some Brazen Borrowers. The Burrogoyf in here is really nice. Some lists are not running at main board, some are running at sideboard. That's fine. We also have access to Kaido in here, and then our big top end with Murktide. Some lists are running a few more, some running a few less. There are a lot more flex spots, but this gives you a good idea of what the package is. Brazen Borrower for some disruption, Thoughtseize for some disruption. We've got a little bit of removal here with Fatal Push. Feed the Cycle here, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Sheldred's Edict, 10 out of 10. Always want to run this card here. Be able to force your opponent to sacrifice one of their creatures or one of their planeswalkers. Whatever sort of annoying thing that they are generating is really, really good. So yeah, if you want a deck that is very powerful in the Dimir side, that can be able to sit here and do these little trade-off and just sort of kind of set themselves up for this big payout card, whether it's like a Murktide, a Kaido, or Burrogoyf, things like that, awesome. You have the ability to have your flip Tameo and just get some of your instants and sorceries back, depending on how you want to be able to set yourself up there. Like, that's why this list is so powerful at what it does. It's able to kind of get these advantages, even with the lands, right? 4 wastelands in here, you know, it's set up to kind of fight against a lot of different decks. It has a lot of cards to be able to help it, and you can see just even the sideboard being so diverse in how it can kind of set itself up, whether you're fighting against like one of those different decks that cares about having a bunch of creatures, right? Like Death and Taxes or things like that. That could be really useful. But anyway, we're not spending too much time on the sideboard. We're focusing mainly on what the main board is trying to do with this tempo list. So this is the blue-black version of tempo. Let's jump in and take a look at what the blue-red version is doing. Let's go into our last flavor of tempo with the Corey Steel Cutter, the blue-red, the Izzet style. Now, if you're familiar with Prowess in Standard or Modern, this should be looking a little bit familiar. It's got a bunch of the tools that you might expect to see, and it is a bit fast, can go wide, can pierce, depending on which style of way you can go about it here. Some lists will run Murktide and go for a bigger top end and not run the Boomerang Basics here. They're not going to run our Storm Chaser's Talent, but this list is, so I wanted to highlight this one in particular because we got to see it on camera doing quite well at the event. So let's talk about the cards that you know that should be very familiar to you. Dragon Rage Chandler, great filter card, is going to help you set up your draws, going to help you get ready for being more prowess triggers. Also fill up your graveyard for that Delirium to be able to have a 3-powered evasive creature, pushing some damage there. The big payout in the deck, besides this Storm Chaser's Talent and Boomerang Basic ability to kind of recast it, because you're going to be making a bunch of otters, right? The ETB, be able to make a 1/1 blue-red otter with prowess, so you can kind of go wide with this. And then the other big one, the most powerful one, is that Corey Steel Cutter that we've talked about. Whenever you're going to be casting your second spell each turn, you create a 1/1 white monk creature that is attached to that Steel Cutter. Now, you can keep doing it and keep going wider and wider and wider on following turns, right? That's the idea of it. You can also equip it onto your Dragon Rage Chandler if you wanted to, and go here, boom, push in for some damage, right? Because it does give the creature trample and haste. But your idea of it is you're playing a lot of those cantripies that we've been talking about, right? Ponders, brainstorms, you're doing these setup turns to help yourself get more resources with flow state, and then you've got your kind of disruptive package with Daze, Force of Will. And Boomerang Basic can also flip and adjust a little bit, right? You can use it a little bit more protective if you want to bounce one of your opponent's things, but for the most part, you're going to be rebouncing in your like Storm Chaser's Talents and stuff to kind of get those replay moments there with it. So very, very powerful, very fast to be able to go for another Wasteland-focused deck, but you can notice 19 lands. You're kind of out the gate going very, very fast. We'll do a quick look over at the sideboard stuff. I'm not going to spend as much time going through it because, you know, you get the idea of what the deck is, right? I'm going to take you down very quickly with this Corey Steel Cutter idea of monks and prowess here. But yeah, cool little flavor there. Let's go take a look at what the control list is, and then we'll talk and wrap the video up with our combo decks. So Control in Legacy looks a little bit different than Control in Modern, especially when you notice that pretty much everybody that is playing blue gets access to some of the best counter magic when it comes to Force of Will, Daze, things like that. So let's talk about what other ways the decks are trying to be control-y. Now, there are a couple of different flex spots within this. You notice already, like Magus of the Moon, Flage, things like that. Even a Snapcaster, you're like, wow, some of these might not be in every control list. This one in particular we're highlighting because it did make the top 8 at the Four Seasons. There's a couple other ones you can see, of course, in our Mox field if you want to check those out. But the way that the deck is set up, a lot of these cards you might see and know, but let's talk about the creature base first, right? The idea of it is we're going to be adjusting and disrupting what you're trying to do by shutting you down from your game plan. A lot of people are sitting here and running fetch lands, they're running the dual lands, and they're running 1, maybe 2 basics, depending on what list they're running. If you're on like a Death and Taxes list, the mono black aggro, you have a lot more basics to work with, but we saw the land list, we saw the Tron list, we saw all these decks that care so much about their land that they're going to be really hurt with this Magus. Could be that very specific of, oh, I expect more decks like that. I expect more of these Cradle Control style lists. I'll run a mainboard Magus for it. Flage, we see how cool it is. We know it's banned in Modern now. It's so good. Snapcaster for the extra utility. Tamiyo, we talked about being able to sit here and do the flippy, get your instants and sorceries back, and just generating clues, getting rid of some advantage. Thunder Trap Trainer to help us dig through, because you can see we've got like 27 instants and sorceries in the list, so definitely worth being able to run. Also, you notice it's got a heavy wizard package. By being able to run Magus, Snap, Tamiyo, Thunder Trap, it opens us up to be able to utilize Flame of Anor. I love Flame of Anor. Great utility card, drawing 2 cards off it, dealing 5 damage to a creature, destroying an artifact. Like, it's got so much versatility and flexibility with it that I like this idea of a Jeskai wizard control. All right, you could, again, take away some of this and open up those flex spots that we talked about. Flame of Anor, get rid of our otters, get rid of, a couple of tools, and just go heavier into it, because right now there's some spots for some flexibility here. But the big payout and the big way to win with this list, no matter what flavor you're going for with Jeskai Control, is our 4th Aer Lingus. You create a bunch of 2/2 of course, knights, they have haste, they have trample. You go wide and you just finish out the game in kind of one go that way, or 2 turns, 3 turns. But basically, you've gotten to the point you've disrupted your opponents enough. You've countered their stuff, you remove their stuff, and you kind of go that route. It is a removal heavy control list, is the way it's set up here, right? Wrath of the Skies, Prismatic Ending, Swords to Plowshare. Even in this case with the Flame of Anor, you're basically keeping threats off the battlefield, and if anything tries to get on that you can't answer with one of those, you've got your Force of Wills, your Force of Negations to kind of keep those in check. Because you're spending all of these resources, Flow State is going to be getting them back, just like we saw in those tempo lists. So if you want a very heavy removal focused deck, this is the one to check out when it comes to Legacy. The other thing is that we're going to highlight here is that Dress Down and Back to Basics. Non-basic lands don't untap during its controller's unstap set. So again, this list is being much more control-y on the way that it's fighting you. All right, killing anything that gets on the battlefield. And if you're tapping out to be able to play this thing, guess what? My Back to Basics is going to keep those lands in check for a while here. This list is running a little bit more of those than others. You have to be careful sometimes, though. If you're running a lot of basics, it might be challenging if you need like the double white for Wrath of Skies, if you need to be able to get the double white, double red to bring back Flage, things like that, especially if you're fighting against a wasteland deck, right? They're going to be able to sit here and target down and destroy some of your dual lands that might make your double casting a little bit more challenging. But this list did well enough to make the top 8. We see kind of reasons why here. So I'm a big fan of the control list in Legacy. So let's go into the combo to wrap up and finish up our video here. Thanks for tuning in for our second Legacy meta breakdown. I realize with how these videos have gone, we're just going to break them up into 3 different parts. So tune in for part 3 as we dive into the combo decks that exist in Legacy. But that's going to do it for us. Thanks for tuning in and watching all. We'll see you all next game.